1, 2, 3. First video. Yes. Hi, Reconsider Simon. Welcome. This is my first video. This feels weird, but diving deep today, talking about crying and the spiritual implications for yourself and also your body. I guess I wanted to start on this topic. I've had a couple of years of quite intense issues with my health, and crying's been really useful. I've had real moments of despair these last couple of years, so it's been a useful tool just to release that kind of agony and that pain within my body. But I think also day-to-day spiritual practice, crying's really, really useful, and I use it quite a lot. Even when I'm particularly not that sad and I can just feel the blockages kind of build up. So I find out that technique has been really, really powerful for me. I guess for me, like when I was young, as a child, I was a bit of a mummy's boy. I was very sensitive, find it difficult spending that much time away from home. So I found school quite difficult. And, especially being children can be quite cruel. And so, when you cry, become a little bit of a target. And then, with school and the systems and also society as a whole, it kind of frowns upon crying, what it did during the 80s and 90s. So I just found myself sort of suppressing that emotion quite a lot. And it came to the point when in my sort of teens, I guess, and 20s, I realised it was very, very rare for me to cry, unless it was a incredibly traumatic experience, like breaking up with a girlfriend, etc. Then I would be able to cry. But I remember just trying to make myself cry. I always find it really difficult, and it wasn't until I started to follow the more of a spiritual path that my body started to open itself out, and I was finding it easier to cry. And I just realised how kind of blocked I was for a long time. My journey started with meditation, and so that kind of helped to really kind of release things from our body. But for me personally, on my journey, it was definitely movement of the body that really, really helped to kind of release some of these blockages held within. At the time, I was attending this organisation called Body and Brain, which you can find them all over the world. They're a Korean organisation, quite popular in America as well. They have a few centres in the UK, but they very much centre around kind of body movements and a lot of shaking. I think they use that in the Osho movement as well. It's a quite controversial documentary on Netflix you can watch about them. But this kind of shaking and use of your body really helped kind of release emotion from my body. Emotion that I've probably held on for a long time, for many years. When I started doing this practice, I found as I was kind of leaving the centre after about an hour session, that I'd feel incredibly sad. And it was just these kind of emotions bubbling to the surface. This was also true when I did a Vipassana 10-day meditation retreat, which is a Buddhist style of meditation. Again, there are centres all over the world. 10 days, you're in complete silence. You're with a group of people. You're eating very sort of pure food, and you're meditating from very early in the morning till quite late at night for 10 days solid. And again, this is another point for me, an important moment in my life when the emotion started to release from my body. I found it easier for emotion to kind of move through me as opposed to getting stuck all the time. Now, I guess I would describe myself as being sort of sensitive and empathic. So I feel sometimes I can pick up on people's energies. So it can be, energies from individuals, or it can be energies from buildings or situations. My current day job at the moment is a freelance designer. So in the past, I've spent a lot of time going to new offices with new people on quite a regular basis, never work in the same office all the time. And sometimes I found I'd start a new office. There's one particular experience. It was quite a small company, probably about 20 or 30 people in a room, and I started. And although the atmosphere didn't appear toxic, I just felt this incredible sadness, like in the room. Whether it was from the environment itself or the people around, I'm not sure. But I just felt this kind of increasing tension within my heart, and it just built as the day went on. And I just felt I need to go to the loo here and just cry this out. I didn't feel like particularly sad in myself. I didn't feel like sad about a situation in my own life, or there's nothing that made me upset that particular day or that was going on within my life. But I found going to the toilet within privacy, just crying on my own, it just released that, and I felt so much better. And that's happened quite a lot. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it just feels like sometimes that I guess maybe being sensitive or being empathic, these emotions do stick to you from either other people or maybe interiors of buildings. I don't know scientifically how that would work, but all I know is the experience I've had, and not feeling particularly sad, but going into particular new environments, just things happening within my body, and then crying just helps me release it. And whether I'm sort of helping just a clear environment, I don't know, but it's always helped for me. So it may help you as well if that kind of resonates. And as I mentioned, now I use crying quite on a regular basis. Sometimes I can just feel it, the sort of tension within my chest. And again, it doesn't have to be linked to anything sort of specific, but it just builds up, and just having a cry just kind of releases it and just makes me feel better. And again, whether that's my own energy that I'm sort of transmuting or someone else's, I don't know. But it definitely helps. And honestly, going back to, new environments and people, and, picking up these energies that, crying helps me release, whether I have a leaky aura or whether there was some more work that I need to do there to sort of prevent that from happening, I don't know. Or maybe it's my job on this planet to cry for everyone else. I have no idea. We're all on a journey. We're all sort of figuring these things out together. So maybe my opinion will be different in a year, 2 years' time. But at this moment in time, I just feel crying's helpful, and maybe it's kind of helping to clear environments. So, that's why I feel at the moment. But crying's also has been very, very powerful tool for me for discovering truth as well, to do with my life, but then also potential on my soul journey. I'm very much a believer that we live as a soul potentially for forever, for infinite, and we have different lifetimes, whether here on earth but other planets as well, or other dimensions. I don't know the sort of full makeup of it, but I do believe that we have different lifetimes. And some of my own inner work in terms of figuring out where I may have been in past lives. I mean, they say past lives, but they could be parallel lives. I mean, who knows how it's all structured? But these kind of understandings are changing all the time. But I mean, it all gets a little bit weird. This is a lot what I'm to do with in terms of I'm quite into the idea of like UFOs, other planets, other consciousness, whether it be extraterrestrials, interdimensionals. These are all the kind of topics that I'm quite into. And I do play around with tarot quite a bit, and I had quite a powerful tarot deck specifically to do with elements of consciousness from other galaxies like Lyra and Vega and Orion star system, all these places. And through these cards, I was able to explore potentially my lineage of my own soul. And then it was the first time I used these cards ever before. And I made, had a nice kind of experience. It was kind of nighttime, I had candles, and I was using this deck. And I just kept getting card after card to do with the sort of star system Vega. And just out of nowhere, I just felt this incredible sadness, this incredible missing of home, this incredible sort of welling up of tears and sadness. And it was just complete confirmation. I'm getting goosebumps at the moment actually talking about it. But it was a complete confirmation for me that I had a potential either parallel life or future life or past life from this star system of Lyra, in particular, the star system of Vega. Sounds pretty woo, but that's what I'm kind of into. And again, the world is just full of synchronicities. And that was one for me to say, yes, this is true. You potentially have had a lifetime in Vega. And I had even more of a confirmation from that. I'll probably splice this into this video. But the very next day after this situation, I was looking for somewhere new to live. And I was cycling to view this new apartment that I potentially was going to move into. And on the way back from that interview, I came across this building, this big new block of flats. I live in Brighton in the UK on the south coast. And there's this new block of flats just on the seafront there. And I noticed that the name of this block of flats was Vega. And I was like, wow, I mean, what more confirmation do you need to have? I mean, I had that experience of the cards, the emotion, and then just this big synchronicity the next day in terms of seeing. I mean, how many buildings in the world are called Vega? I mean, probably not that many. But again, it was just a big confirmation for me of my own kind of potential journey as a soul. And I found that a lot of times before. I had a reading recently with a lady who's been helping. She works on quite a high level in terms of multidimensional nature. She was telling me these truths, which at the time were quite hard to hear and really, really triggering. But I was just getting these waves of really deep emotion, like, and I almost burst into tears actually during the session itself. And again, it's just a confirmation for me that, that sadness, that kind of just indicates within you. It's how we actually explore this reality, this kind of situation we're in. It is through emotion. And it was just like, again, it was a complete confirmation that what she was saying, although it was hard to hear, was true. So again, there's another element of like how crying and sadness can really help to kind of explore your own lineage as a soul potentially as well. But of course, I mean, I'm talking about a kind of a healthy level of crying. I mean, there's the unhealthy approach where you're not experiencing any emotion at all and you're bottling up. I think that especially happens with guys as well. I mean, I'm at the level where I can sort of cry freely in front of people. So maybe that's a fault of mine. Maybe I need to be able to do that without feeling any shyness about it. But still something I definitely do. I live alone, so I can do it quite easily in my flat. And again, like I'm just coming out of this health issue that I've had for the couple of years, and it's been really tough. And weirdly, like I think because I've been in a real sort of body's keeping at a level where I can kind of deal with what I've been dealing with. But coming out of that and then having kind of better health emotionally, it's all kind of hit me at once. And so I've been going to these I've been sort of meditating regularly again. And after the meditations, it's just bringing more emotion up, just crying it out. And again, it just kind of helps me to release what I've been through in other situations within a day. But what I was meant to say was, so there's that kind of healthy way of approaching it. But of course, there can be unhealthy crying as well, where you're crying all the time. And, I've known people have done that, been a real traumatic, intense period of their lives of depression, and it's just crying too much. So there is that to kind of be aware of, where you have that deep-seated trauma. And then having experienced, that with people I know, that's really hard to unpick. So my hearts kind of go out to them in those sort of situations. But yeah, there is obviously to be aware of that there is, a point of like too much crying and it being a point of trauma as well, which needs to be explored. I mean, I've been, talking about crying in a sense of in more of a metaphysical, from a woo-woo on the fringes sort of point of view, spiritual sense. There's always the mainstream opinion, which is obviously tends to be a more materialistic sort of scientific way. Crying is a detoxing thing. So, you cry tears for your eyes, lubricates your eyes, keeps them protected. Also releases cortisol in the body. Stress hormone, that's released, you feel a lot better, you feel calmer as well. So there's that kind of element to it. I was definitely sort of approaching something like crying with that in mind, but then also it being more of a, you're holding emotion, you're holding kind of trauma within your body physically, and it sort of needs to kind of come out from past situations, and who knows how far back that goes, whether that's in other lifetimes, etc. But, on the more mainstream way, there's interesting data to do with like crying. This is more specific to the UK. And so there is that cultural aspect to kind of think about. And apparently, forgive, I'm going to read off this a bit of paper because I can't remember these figures in my head, but yeah, 1 in 3 18 to 24-year-old women cry every week. And then overall, 18% of women cry once a week, and then it's only 4% of men cry once a week. So yeah, it gives you an indication of like what's happening across society. And again, that's within a British cultural sense. And there's always that idea that in Britain we're more emotionally repressed. I don't know if that's still true, but that's the kind of cultural kind of ideas. And maybe you think about more kind of Latin countries like I don't know, like Italy, etc., where more in touch with their emotions, the way they talk, more expressive. Whether those rates of crying go out, I don't know, and that'll be an interesting thing to look at. But I think there's a cultural aspect to crying as well at the same time. And on that subject, I had a friend actually who moved to Japan and met a girl and ended up getting married to said girl. They moved back to the UK. They moved to London, and it was at his wedding. His new spouse's parents were there, so obviously both from Japan, and they couldn't speak a word of English, but so he did a speech, but it is in Japanese, and it was then translated by someone else. And at the end of his speech, he did this very sort of orchestrated theatrical crying, where he's like banging his head, and then just, I think you've seen it sometimes before when sort of in the news, when great shame has been brought upon like a CEO in Japan, they sort of have this very public shaming and they do this bowing and crying at the same time. Probably someone else will know more about this than I do, but I was talking to my friend afterwards and he was saying, well, men in Japan don't get that much opportunity to cry, so it's a very sort of specific point in a man's life where they can cry at their sort of daughter's wedding, and it's something they do culturally. So I thought that was interesting, but it did look very theatrical, like it was kind of part of the speech, like you cry at the end, rather than being an actual kind of show of emotion. Like he's not actually that sad, but yeah, there's that kind of interesting cultural aspect to crying. I mean, we can go even more sort of metaphysical in terms of the potential science of memory and water. And there's a famous Japanese scientist called Professor Emoto, and he did a lot of experiments in terms of the emotion and tension of like towards water. So he would play beautiful classical music to water as it was freezing. It would create these really stunning patterns. And then on the other flip side of the coin, he would play like heavy metal, much darker, sort of heavier kind of music. And this would create quite discoherent sort of ugly patterns within water itself. And then it not only was just music and sound, but also just pure emotion as well. If the intent of love to liquid would create these very beautiful, again, coherent patterns. But then if you're sending hate to this, the water as it's freezing, it would create very, again, discoherent, ugly patterns. So when you're thinking about releasing tears from your body, like how potentially water can kind of hold memory. So it's an interesting thing to think about, is that, it's a very sort of excretive process, and whether when you're crying about a particular situation or memory, whether that is whole within the water itself. I mean, I've no way of proving that, but yeah, it's interesting to kind of consider. Another very important aspect to the story for me, in terms of the body being able to express itself and release emotion and what can kind of cause blockages, can be a very physical aspect of toxification of the body. This is, again, very personal to me, so it may not resonate with everyone, but I've struggled like quite a bit with aspects of my health, and it kind of all started when I was a child, and I was, it took me a long time, that's a whole other story, but I was diagnosed with leukemia, so I had to go through a whole kind of chemotherapy thing. And as a young child, in that body, it's quite a lot to do with. And I think the body has a lot of wisdom when it's kind of having these kind of traumatic situations in the medical mainstream. Medicine, in its own wisdom, is trying to do its best, and it introduces these chemicals into the body. The body's there, therefore it's having an effect, but it's also causing a certain amount of toxicity within the body. And it stuffs, this stuff into weird areas of the body, like joints and muscles, and it can stay there for years, I think. And then you've got that aspect, and I didn't help myself as a student when I was at university. Obviously, you're not living the healthiest. I was eating bad food. I was going out a lot, drinking a lot, etc. doing other things. But this is all more kind of toxicity within the body, and like already my body was kind of laden with stuff I dealt with as a child. And as I found, as I got older into my sort of mid to late 20s, my body was really starting to give up even more. I had problems with my thyroid and stuff. And and I think this is all kind of a level of like toxification that's been held on for many years. And I've been going on this detoxification journey now for quite a while. And it's still more stuff's coming up. And I found the more I've detoxed my body, the more I'm in touch with it as well. And it's easier for emotions to kind of pass through me. And like that's been a big part of me sort of getting healthier emotionally, but then also physically, has been detoxing my body. So that's another vital aspect to my personal journey anyway. So that's the end of my ramble about crying. I've no idea if it was good or not. I plan to do more, so hopefully I'll get better at it. But thank you very much for joining with me, and I'll speak to you soon.